Ready for a deep dive into some serious emotional territory?
Oh, absolutely.
We're jumping into chapters 6 and 7 of The Only One,
Okay.
where we see Sheng Wang grappling with grief, family dynamics, the whole shebang.
Yeah, these chapters are like a crash course in how differently people deal with loss and change, especially within a family.
Totally. I mean, you've got Sheng Wang still raw from his mother's death.
Right.
His dad, instead of being a source of comfort, is practically a ghost himself with all that traveling.
Yeah.
And then, boom, you bring in Jiang Ao and her son, Jiang Tian.
Right into the mix.
Talk about a recipe for tension.
Oh, yeah. The author really nails those conflicting emotions Sheng Wang's going through. The grief for his mom, the resentment toward his dad.
It's like he doesn't even know where to direct all that emotion.
Exactly.
And then, in chapter 6, catching people, we see him trying to create distance, almost like he's putting up walls. That no knocking sign on his door, it's not just about privacy, it's a whole symbol.
It's a statement.
It's like he's saying, stay away from me from all this.
It's a classic defense mechanism. Keep everyone at arm's length so you don't risk getting hurt even more.
Exactly. But then there's this little detail, this little crack in the armor. Remember that rumor about Jiang Tian going around school?
Yeah.
Sheng Wang actually looks into it.
Interesting.
It's like this tiny hint of curiosity peeking through all that anger and sadness.
Right. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, he's starting to look beyond his own pain, trying to figure out who this new guy in his house really is.
It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
It's a turning point.
And then, boom, chapter 7, sticky notes.
Things get even messier, right?
The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sheng Wang is practically comparing living with Jiang Tian to some dramatic soap opera.
And the way he deals with it, that dark humor. Remember when he jokes about borrowing a dog just so he can let it pee on Jiang Tian's floor?
Yeah. It's funny, but it's also kind of sad when you think about it.
Totally. He'd rather make light of the situation than actually deal with how uncomfortable he feels.
Exactly. He's deflecting, avoiding.
Yeah.
Which is totally different from Jiang Tian, who's all about keeping his emotions bottled up.
Two sides of the same coin, in a way. Both struggling to adapt, but in completely opposite ways.
Okay, but what about that moment when Sheng Wang is totally stumped by that physics problem, and then, bam, he finds a sticky note with the solution?
Oh, that's huge. Jiang Tian, without making a big deal out of it, steps in and helps.
And that little detail speaks volumes about
Oh,
him.
absolutely. It tells you he's observant, he's empathetic, picking up on Sheng Wang's frustration, even though Sheng Wang tries to hide it.
Exactly. It's like this silent act of kindness that manages to break through some of those walls Sheng Wang has so carefully built.
For sure. And it forces Sheng Wang to acknowledge him, even if it's just for a second.
Yeah, he can't ignore him anymore.
It challenges his whole perception of Jiang Tian, who he's labeled as the intruder.
Right, exactly. And then that little note at the bottom about not meddling. It's almost like a playful jab,
Oh, totally. Like he's saying, hey, I helped you out, but don't get any ideas.
like a challenge.
Yeah, an invitation to engage, even if it's just to argue. It's fascinating how the author uses these small, almost insignificant moments to show us the complexity of their relationship.
It's like all the unspoken stuff bubbling under the surface. And it's not just with the Jiang Tian that there's this awkward dance going on. You can feel Sheng Wang wanting that connection with his dad, but it's like they keep missing each other's signals.
Totally. Like that thing with his dad calling him Wang Zai after his mom died, but then once they get a driver, it just stops.
It's like he's trying to hold on to something,
Yeah.
but it's not real,
Exactly. Clinging to the past instead of facing the pain of the present. And Sheng Wang sees right through it.
It's heartbreaking because what he really needs is for his dad to just be real with him, acknowledge the hurt, not try to smooth it over with a nickname.
Exactly. And then later, when Sheng Wang overhears his dad talking about him to Jiang Ao, saying he's tough on the outside but soft on the inside,
Yeah.
talk about missing the mark. It's like Sheng Mingyang is building this whole narrative about his son that's totally off base.
Projecting instead of actually seeing him.
Exactly. And how does Sheng Wang react? By doing the exact opposite of what his dad expects. Claims he failed 3 subjects when he actually aced them.
Classic teenage rebellion.
Right. It's about control, saying you don't get to define me, you don't know what's going on inside. But there's this vulnerability there, too.
Totally. Like, see me, Dad? See how much this hurts.
Exactly. He's pushing his dad away, but at the same time, he desperately wants his understanding. It's a tough spot to be in.
And isn't it interesting how, even with all this tension between them, we start to see this weird parallel between Sheng Wang and Jiang Tian?
Totally. They're both carrying all this unspoken stuff, this feeling of being out of place. Remember that part when Sheng Wang sees Jiang Tian outside on the phone? He picks up on the annoyance and displeasure in his voice.
Like he recognizes something familiar.
Right. It's subtle, but it creates this connection between them, even though on the surface they're like oil and water.
And then when Jiang Tian gets that money from his own dad,
Yeah.
he totally shuts down.
It's like, boom, this whole other side of him emerges.
You realize he's not just this stoic, unfeeling robot. He's got his own baggage, his own complicated history.
And suddenly they're not so different after all.
Shared experience, even if it's unspoken, can be a powerful thing.
It creates a bridge.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of what paves the way for that moment with the physics problem, that little act of kindness.
It's possible, remember Jiang Tian, he's like a ghost in a way, but he sees everything.
Quietly observing.
Right, and maybe he could sense that Sheng Wang was struggling even though Sheng Wang would never admit it out loud.
Trying to keep up that tough guy act.
Exactly, but that act doesn't work on Jiang Tian.
So then he leaves that sticky note with the solution, and it's like this tiny act of rebellion almost.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like he's saying, I see you, I know you're struggling, and I'm going to help whether you like it or not.
And then that little note at the bottom about the meddling, it's almost playful, right?
Absolutely. It's like a dare, almost like he's saying, okay, I helped you out this time, but don't think this means we're friends.
But there's something deeper there too, right?
Oh, yeah, there's this invitation in those words, like he's leaving the door open just a crack, saying, maybe we could be something more than just people who live in the same house.
Maybe.
Maybe. And that's what makes this story so powerful. It's
Yeah.
all about these little moments, these tiny interactions that hint at something bigger.
It's like the author is holding up a mirror to those awkward fumbling attempts we make to connect with each other, especially when we're hurting.
Exactly. And it leaves us hanging, right? Will Sheng Wang step through that door that Jiang Tian has left open?
Or will he just keep putting up walls?
It's the question that lingers as you finish the book. What happens to these two boys, each carrying their own baggage, each trying to find their way?
And it makes you think about all the ways we try to reach out to each other, even when it's messy, even when it's awkward.
Especially then.
Because sometimes those messy fumbling attempts, those are the ones that matter most.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this story resonate with anyone who's ever felt lost or alone or unsure of how to bridge the gap with someone who seems worlds away.
Because maybe, just maybe, all it takes is a sticky note, a shared glance, a silent understanding to start to build a bridge.
That's the hope anyway.
And on that note of hope and uncertainty and the possibility of connection, we come to the end of another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring these chapters with you, really diving into the nuances of grief and family and the unexpected ways we find each other.
Until next time, keep those pages turning. Keep asking those tough questions. And most importantly, keep your hearts open to those moments of connection, no matter how small they may seem.